Welcome everyone to this episode of Arcade USA. We're going to be celebrating the 35th anniversary of Tetris. Oh yeah, I absolutely love Tetris. I've actually got a Game Boy that I carry with me for work. I've carried it for over 30 years just to play Tetris. It's a really fun game. What I like about Tetris is you're trying to get all these blocks to fill in down at the bottom of the screen to get maximal points, of course. But it's that gameplay of trying to make everything fit together that I think is so addicting for a lot of people, especially me. Being a logically thinking person, I like to put things in order, and Tetris just kind of fits that bill for me. Now, I was first exposed to Tetris in the late 80s. While I was going to college for my robotics degree, one of my professors, he brought in this old floppy disk, one of these big 5 1/4 floppy disks. Yeah, I'm that old. And he goes, "You guys have got to see what I just downloaded off this BBS." And it was Tetris. It was a shareware version of Tetris for DOS. We got hooked on that game. Every day around at lunchtime, you'd see a bunch of us sitting around the computer lab playing Tetris. Such a great game. Now, I didn't get a home version of Tetris until later on in the 80s. I actually was able to get a hold of a Tetris game on my Atari 800 off of BBS that I played quite a bit. And of course, in 1989, when the Game Boy came out, and I saw Tetris was coming packed with the Game Boy, that's all she wrote. I picked up a Game Boy, and that's the Tetris I've been carrying around all this time. Such a great game. Really love it. Now, Tetris was developed by Alexey Pajitnov. I know I just butchered his last name. Very sorry, Alexey, if you see this. I'm terrible at pronouncing names. But anyway, Alexey had this idea for this game back in the mid-80s or so. He developed it on a Russian computer called the Electronica 60, which was kind of like the PDP-11 over here in the States. And he got the idea from a game that he liked to play that used little tetrominoes that you would try to put together and stuff in this little puzzle thing. So he made a computerized version where you would drop these bricks down the well, like this, to do basically the same thing. And he pretty much knew at the very beginning he had something. He had a hit on his hands. Now, unfortunately, being in Russia, you don't get any credit for anything that you develop or anything like that. So it was years before Alexey got notification or official recognition for developing this game. As a matter of fact, him and this other guy started the Tetris company. I can't remember the name of it. Anyway, this is not a historical documentary. This is just me sharing memories of Tetris. If you want to see a really good documentary on Tetris and how it came about, and it has lots of great interviews of Alexey in there, some other people, check out From Russia with Love, a Tetris story. I'll put a link down in the show notes down below. You can actually watch this on YouTube. The full episode is on YouTube. It's about an hour long. It's very informative. It's actually a really good documentary to watch. I highly recommend it if you're a Tetris fanatic like I am. So yeah, definitely check it out. Now, as part of this anniversary video, I asked a lot of my fellow podcasting friends and YouTube friends to share some memories of Tetris, some of their favorite memories. So we're going to start it off with UK Mike from Retro Gaming Roundup. Let's see what his memories are of Tetris.
Hello there, this is UK Mike from the Retro Gaming Roundup podcast, and Willie has asked me to give you a couple of minutes on Tetris, my memories of Tetris, and what I think about Tetris. Tetris. It is one of my favourite games of all time, and it's in my top 3 constantly, but my top 3 kind of jumps around a bit, depending what mood I'm in, what I've played most recently. But it's always in that top 3. And I remember the first time I played it, a neighbour of mine had a Game Boy. Obviously, it came with Tetris as the pack-in. And he showed me this thing. And he had Mario Land in at the time. And then he put in this little cart called Tetris, and he said, oh, this one came with it as well. Do you want to try that? So I tried it, and I've been hooked ever since. I still play Tetris every week. Not every day, but I'll have at least 1 or 2 games of Tetris every week. The original Game Boy version for me is just the best. This goes for all versions, but it is just such a simple game. And it literally goes with that mantra of a minute to learn and a lifetime to master. It really does. It is so simple. And it's plainly obvious right from the get-go what you have to do. And it's one of those games that just keeps you coming back, because every game you could do better than you did on your previous one. Every single time you play a game of Tetris, you might beat your high score. And it's you against the machine. There is nothing else, no other factors. It's just you, your speed, your skill, your dexterity, reading the next pieces. And that's all there is to it. Rinse and repeat. And all these years later, 30 years later in fact, and I'm still playing the same damn game. Personally, I love to play the Game B type on the original Game Boy, which is where you just have to get 25 lines, and I start that off on the hardest difficulty and try and get the highest score I can. You know, you need to get Tetrises to get some of the world record times. I've got close. I've got some pretty good scores on there. One time I had, I think, the 3rd highest according to Twin Galaxies, but I've never caught it on video. I did try for a little while, but could just never seem to repeat it on video. So I gave up. It was kind of ruining my enjoyment of Tetris, so I just play it for fun now. I've tried most versions of it. There are lots of them out there. It's just about everywhere. But for me, the original Game Boy is the best, although I do really like the Super Nintendo version, Tetris Battle Gaiden. It's a Japanese-only release, but you don't need to read Japanese to play it. And that throws in a couple of curveballs. It's played either 2-player or 1-player against the CPU, and you can see the pieces coming. Your next pieces, I think you can see 4 or 5 pieces, and you get to fight against your opponent over which piece you get. So if there's a piece coming up you really want, you kind of time the drop of the current piece that's falling so that the next piece in the queue or the one after it will be yours, and you fight over the pieces. And every so often there'll be a magic dot that comes down, and you build up magic, and you can throw spells at your opponent. That might be throwing them 4 lines of garbage. It might be slowing them down. It might be flipping the controls, so left is right, right is left. And it just adds a new dimension to the simple game of Tetris. It's a fantastic version, and I would recommend you check it out, definitely. But in my opinion, you cannot beat that original Game Boy Tetris version. The soundtrack is iconic, and it's one of those tunes that's only a few seconds long, and it loops and loops and loops, but you don't get sick of it. I still play Tetris with the sound on. I'm still not sick of the tune. Every ingredient in the game goes together to just make one of the best video games that's ever been made. And here we are, still talking about it, still playing it 30 years later.
Thanks for the auto submission, UK. That was awesome. You can see UK Mike or listen to him on their podcast, Retro Gaming Roundup, which also is hosted by my good friend Scott Schreiber. Check them out. I'll put a link down in the show notes below to their podcast. But yeah, I agree. The Game Boy version of Tetris is probably my all-time favorite. UK Mike is a Tetris master, in my opinion. I've seen him play Tetris. We've been at Classic Gaming Expo 2014, and he's really good at this game, much better than I am. As a matter of fact, here's my original Game Boy that I used to carry with me on the road to play Tetris early on. Now I tend to carry this Game Boy Pocket. As you see right there's Tetris. It's loaded in, ready to go. So next up on the list, let's see what my buddy Glenn from Glenn's Retro Show has to say about Tetris.
Hi Willie, thank you very much for having me on Arcade USA to talk about the
35th anniversary
of Tetris. It's really hard to believe it's been years since Tetris came out. Some of those things that you kind of always thought was there, but it wasn't. And I do remember back in 1984, it was the summer of 1984 in fact, one of my friends didn't see him anymore during the summer. We were out every day on our bikes doing things, and he was gone for days. So my cousin and I went over to his house to find out he was in his room on his IBM compatible computer back then. This is 1984, remember, so people still had Commodore 64s and TI 994As and PC compatibles. And he was playing this game, and he was zoned in. I mean, you could call his name, Peter, 10 times. Couldn't get his attention. He was playing Spectrum Holobyte's Tetris on his computer. Now, his computer was only CGA graphics, was only 4 colors, and just a PC sound effects, just beeps, and that was it. We didn't really understand what he was doing at the particular time we saw him playing it, but we watched him, and then we each had a turn, and we were hooked. Before we knew it, summer was over. We pretty much spent the entire summer in his bedroom playing Tetris, trying to outdo each other. It's such a simple game, yet it's something that keeps your attention not only over hours, but over the years. Tetris today is just as popular as it was back then. Of course, Tetris really took on even a more popular role with the Nintendo Gameboy. Now, I suggest everyone out there do a little history lesson to find out how Tetris first came to the States from the Soviet Union and the whole thing between Atari, Spectrum Holobyte, and Nintendo. It's actually quite crazy how it all happened. And the poor programmer who made the game, who didn't make a dime until maybe 10, 15 years ago, because the Soviet Union didn't allow him to make any money. The game belonged to the Soviet Union. But I still play Tetris to this very day. As a matter of fact, I have my new Super Impulse Tiny Arcade Tetris, which I love playing this little guy. Even on your phone. So everyone, big congratulations to Tetris for its
35th anniversary.
And Willie, thanks once again, for having me on Arcade USA to talk about it. Remember everyone, whether you're playing Tetris or anything, game on.
That is awesome, Glenn. What a great story. Yeah, when I brought my Game Boy home, my wife pretty much confiscated it. Anytime I was home from work or traveling, I never saw my Game Boy. So actually, the only time I got to play Tetris is when I was traveling. But anyway, yeah, I got that little tiny arcade Tetris too. This is made by Super Impulse. Both Glenn and I have done reviews on these. I believe Glenn's done one on this. Glenn has a really cool YouTube channel. He's very family friendly. He does a lot of neat things like making little arcade conversions of things. He puts a RetroPie in them, makes like little arcade games and things like that. And he also does a lot of stuff with Arcade 1-Up, and now he's working with At Games on their new Ultimate Legends arcade cabinet coming out. He actually has a little spinner that he's developed to replace the spinner on the Arcade 1-Up cabs, like for the Tempest one and stuff. That's actually pretty freaking awesome. So, if you like that kind of stuff, make sure you check out Glenn's channel. He's a lot of fun to watch, and he's pretty cool. So, next up, we're going to listen to my good pal Ferg from the Atari 2600 Game by Game podcast. See what his Tetris memory is.
The first time I was aware of Tetris was when it came out for the Game Boy in 1989. I remember seeing the commercials for it. I know now that it was out for computers starting in 1984 in Russia, I believe. So I did not know about those because I did not have a computer in the 80s. So I did not play the Game Boy version. I think the NES version came out soon after the Game Boy version did. And when my wife Sarah and I started dating, I bought that for her at Captron. If you remember Captron, it was a video game store in malls, basically, at that time. That was in 91, I believe I bought that. We played it quite a bit together, even though it's only a one-player game. I did not know about the Tengen version at the time, which you could play not co-op, but against each other on the same screen. I did find one later for $5 in a junk store in town. I was lucky to find that, but I sold it later on because I liked the NES version better, even though it's only one player. After the NES version came out, I got an SNES. Tetris 2 came out for that, and I think it also came out for the NES, but I don't think I've ever played that version. I got it for the SNES, and I loved it at the time. I remember many afternoons sitting at home in our apartment and playing Tetris 2, and that music is pretty much burned into my brain. I played it, I think, a couple of years ago at during one of the Extra Life marathons that I did, and it did not go well. It did not transfer to my adult life. So, well, I was an adult at the time too, but it's very sparse and very slow to me now. After this, I worked at Rutgers University in one of the dining halls, and I found out that there was an arcade in the student center next door. So I went over there one day during my lunch and found a bunch. It was a pretty sizable arcade for a student center in a college. And they had the Tetris machine there that I think Atari made. So I didn't know until then that there was an arcade version of Tetris as well. So I played that one quite a bit while I was at work during my lunch and all that kind of stuff. During the summertime, there weren't any kids in there, so it was a lot easier to get out of work during work hours and play Tetris. I also played Clax there. They had a Clax machine. I think that might have been the first time I played Clax too. In 95 or 96, I can't remember exactly what year now, was when the first Atari 2600 game homebrew came out. And that was by Ed Federmeyer, and he was the one who actually coined the term homebrew. And that was called Etris, and you can guess what that is. It's the Atari 2600 version of Tetris. It was very, I guess, rudimentary. I don't think there was any sound. I'm not sure. There might have been a few sounds. But it was very flickery. But, I mean, it was Tetris on the Atari 2600, and it was a new game for the Atari 2600, which was pretty amazing at that time. Now you have Shatiri, which is a really excellent version of Tetris for the 2600, if you want to check that out. I think you could still get, you might still be able to get both of these on Atari Age, in the Atari Age store. I'm not sure about that. After 98 or so, I didn't really play Tetris that much. I would play it every once in a while. Sarah still likes it. Whenever we go to Crabtown, USA in Maryland, they have a giant arcade there, and she always plays the Tetris machine. The last time I played Tetris was actually a few weeks ago. It was the Switch version, Tetris 99. Our friend Nikki brought it over, and we were playing it, and we were trying to hook it up to the internet, which was a bit of a problem. I was able to get in one game of Tetris 99 before the internet crapped out on us. And if you're not familiar with Tetris 99 for the Switch, it's you versus 99 other people across the world. And I actually came in 49th, which I was pretty proud of myself for doing that. It's a little bit different. I don't remember being able to choose your piece in the original game on the NES, but you could do that here, but I didn't know that at the time. So I wasn't doing that. But anyway, a lot of people still play Tetris. Obviously, there was there was one for the Wii, a Tetris Party, I think it was, that we rented from the library, and it was really, really a lot of fun. It was kind of like the versus Tetris that we couldn't play on the NES version. But that was a lot of fun, and it's just hard to find a copy of it for ourselves. I don't want to steal the library's copy. But anyway, I think Tetris is 35 years old this year. I don't really know anything about Tetris's inventor, Alexey Pajitnov. I hope that he is wealthy because the Tetris story is long and winding, and a lot of people besides him made money on it, which is too bad. So I hope he's seeing at least some kind of cash from this. So happy birthday to Tetris.
Thanks, Ferg, for that audio submission. Yeah, I remember playing Tetris in the arcade as well. I actually liked the Tetris arcade machine. I've not seen one in quite a while. It's nice to know that there's a Tetris machine, I guess, up around you. So next time I'm in the area, we're going to have to go down there and try to play that game. So next up, we're going to listen to what my good buddy John Gamester81 has to say about Tetris.
Guys, what's up? How's it going? It's John, also known as Gamester81. And when I think about Tetris, the fact that it's turning 35 years old, first off, it makes me feel crazy old because it's such an iconic game and series. It's been around for 35 years. And my favorite memory of Tetris, to be honest with you, and it's probably back in the original Game Boy. It was a launch title for the Game Boy, pack-in for the Game Boy. I remember as a kid coming home for the first time with the handheld Game Boy and playing pretty much like the NES experience in the palm of my hand. It was pretty incredible. And the first game, of course, that I played was sure enough Tetris. So that's definitely a great memory of mine. Tetris, obviously, it's been a game that's been on other platforms, not only just platforms today, still around, very relevant today, but it's also classic computers to arcades, retro consoles. So it's definitely expanded a ton of different platforms, and there's very few games you can say that's the case for. So a lot of fun memories for Tetris. Definitely the Game Boy is one of my most fondest.
Thanks for that submission, John. Yes, you're seeing a theme here. The Game Boy version of Tetris seems to be a lot of people's favorite memory. Rightfully so. Nintendo hit it out of the ballpark when they packaged Tetris with that Game Boy back in 1989. There were people buying Game Boys that really weren't gamers, but they loved Tetris. So Nintendo really did a smart move when they did that. It's awesome. So now let's listen to an audio submission by my good pal Vic Sage, who does the Diary of an Arcade Employee podcast. Link down below. Hear what he has to say about Tetris.
Hey there, friends! Since Arcade USA is celebrating the 35th anniversary of Tetris, I'm here to share how that iconic game cost me a home video game championship trophy, as well as a $1,500 gift certificate to Toys R Us. Back in 1991, just 2 years after the game had made a splash, thanks to Nintendo's Game Boy, as well as being released on the Nintendo Entertainment System, I found myself in a video game competition at a local video store. There were 2 stages of the competition, each split into 3 age categories, a qualifier round where we had to reach a certain score on Capcom's codename Viper, and then the next week, those that qualified had to play against all the others in their age bracket. In my case, for the second week it was the acclaimed Double Dragon 2 port to the NES. Well, I won. I not only received a small trophy for the feat, but also was allowed to go to the regional the next week. The flagship store for this local video chain was about 2 hours away. So, on that Saturday morning, my father and grandmother were kind enough to pile into the car and head out. The way the regional worked was a little off. They allowed the age brackets to go in order, so the more younger kids, which there were about 20, each faced off 3 at a time, each playing the same game, and the one with the highest score after 3 minutes waited in the wings until it got down to the final victor. So, by the time it reached my age category, it was early evening. We had been there for easily 6 hours. Now, the good news is there was only 5 teenagers in my category, but the staff apparently felt it was time to end this. So my name was called, my father and grandmother wishing me good luck. Walking past them, I remarked, "I'll be fine as long as it's not Tetris." This is where I have to admit that I sadly am all thumbs when it comes to playing Tetris. I recognize it as an absolutely iconic game and worthy of its recognition, but I'm just no good at it at all. You can guess what game powered up when they flipped the power switch, my friends. I can vividly recall slowly looking up to make eye contact with my grandmother and the shock on her face as she realized what I was about to play. Here's the kicker though, my fellow contestants were not playing Tetris. In a rush to finish the competition, I saw one was playing Super Mario Bros. And another was playing Sky Kid, games that scored quite differently to say the least. Now, even though I came in last, 2 of the contestants just left after they had lost. I ended up scoring a Konami Laserscope headset for my troubles. More importantly though, I earned a story about Tetris.
Oh, that was awesome, Vic. Yeah, I can imagine if you can't play Tetris and the game they fire up is Tetris you have to play in a competition, that would kind of take the wind right out of your sails. So now, let's take a look at what Mr. John Hancock has to say about a favorite memory of Tetris.
Immortal John Hancock here, and today I'm sharing my memories of Tetris. And really, this comes down to some very special childhood memories I had with this game in particular. And what you're looking at is my copy of Tetris that I grew up with. I absolutely loved Tetris on the Game Boy. To me, growing up with the Game Boy, it wouldn't be an awesome experience without this game. And the fact that it was bundled in, this is an amazing version. If you haven't played it, it's great. And so I remember, hearing about a portable Nintendo on a radio ad. And, I was really worried because at the time, I had a Nintendo and I was worried about it being pretty expensive. And then I heard the price. The price at the time was fairly affordable, less than $100. And I was able to work and do some extra chores. And I was able to sell some of my extra games that I had for my Sega Genesis. And I was able to get, that's right, a Game Boy. And it came bundled with Tetris, and it was just an amazing experience. I remember just playing that all the time, and I didn't have many games, and to me the Game Boy was and always will be remembered for Tetris. And there were some other great games, but I don't remember any of the other Game Boy games I had in my collection, honestly. all I remember is that I played lots and lots of Tetris. I played a lot at home. I didn't take my Game Boy anywhere. It's kind of funny, even though it's like a portable system. The Game Boy was, and Tetris is what I played in my room because I didn't have a TV at the time. You know, this was very special to me that I could play my own game, portable game console in my room and play it by myself. And so I really have some great memories of Tetris, and that is what Tetris was for me growing up.
Thanks for that clip, John. Yep, another vote for Game Boy Tetris. Of course, John, you're making me feel old. I was out of college when I got my Game Boy, and you were still a kid. Oh my gosh. Oh man. So, next up, we're going to listen to a memory from another good friend of mine, Mr. Jason Heine, who does Heine House Live. Does a lot of music, covering music, things like that. He also has a YouTube channel that he does a lot of thrifting and game hunting, things like that. He's actually a pretty cool dude. He's a lot of fun to watch on his YouTube channel. He does some really great music. He actually did the Tetris remix for this episode. So that's his music that you heard at the very beginning. You're going to hear at the very end. So let's see what Jason has to say about Tetris.
Oh, Tetris. I feel like it was just yesterday. Happy anniversary, Tetris. It's one of those amazing, pioneering puzzle games that everyone knows and loves. I mean, you could go to your grandma or your grandpa right now and just ask them. Be like, Gramps, you remember Tetris? And she'd be like, oh, yeah, I remember. I used to play that. That's just the thing. Everyone knows Tetris. It is that iconic. Well, that and the Mario franchise. I bet you everyone knows about Mario. For me, Tetris started back in the 80s in an arcade called Games People Play. A dark, grimy, dirty, sometimes an occasional fight would break out. But that's what the arcades were back in the 80s. And it was just so glorious. I remember seeing the cabinet for the first time. It was a smaller cabinet, and it had that iconic Tetris music that we know and love today. I have a great story I want to tell about Tetris here. In 2009, I was living in Colorado Springs, and I was cruising Craigslist, and I found an ad for somebody saying that there is a Tetris arcade for sale for $50, if you can believe it. I thought it was a joke. Ended up writing the person. Sure enough, it was a legit arcade cabinet. Although I noticed something fascinating about the cabinet was that it didn't look like an original Tetris cabinet. It was a Mario wide body cabinet from Nintendo. I instantly said I would like to purchase the game, and I went to U-Haul, rented a trailer, hooked it up to my SUV, and drove an hour into Denver to pick it up. Ended up meeting the person. It was a legit game. Sure, it was in rough condition, but I ended up paying $50 for this Tetris game. Ended up taking it home, shoving it into the trailer, driving the game all the way home, and I wanted to restore it. It was really fascinating because I was working on it, and I opened up the back, and come to find out, inside the cabinet was the original marquee at the bottom. It had all of the side art. It had all these extra parts. It had a bag of screws and bits and pieces for the PCB and all this stuff. It was just like a relic. It was like somebody just put stuff in there for safekeeping almost. And it was insane. And part of me, now this is where I struggled with it, because part of me wanted to redo the cabinet and put the original Mario Brothers in there. Because it was a wide body, an orange wide body cabinet. So I fought back and forth. I went with my judgment call, and instead of rebuilding the Mario cabinet, which maybe I should, I don't know. I ended up not doing it. I wanted to put Tetris in there. That's what was in there at the time. And I ended up restoring the cabinet, doing some woodwork, using some wood putty and some screws and 2x4s, and I ended up completely rebuilding the cabinet. And I had a fully functional, working, beautiful Tetris. What's really interesting, too, is the overlay where the control panel was, whoever had it before put it on upside down. So instead of peel it all off and try to go and reprint a new one, I just left it. It was kind of a very interesting look, but I left it. So I had a fully working Tetris cabinet and absolutely love it. It's a great game. It's fantastic. And I'm so thankful to still have it with Tetris 99 and a bunch of other great Tetris games. Here we are, so many years later, still celebrating and playing one of the most iconic puzzle games of all time. Tetris, happy anniversary. We love you.
Thanks for that video clip, Jason. On Arcade Tetris for $50. Dude! If you see a black van in your driveway, just ignore it. You don't see anything. Next time I'm out in Arizona, man, I want to come by and play that Tetris arcade game. That's awesome that you actually restored it and everything. I love the Tetris arcade game. As a matter of fact, I would love to have one again. I had one, back in the early 90s or so when I was still living in Indiana, but I sold it off when I moved because my new house, not a whole lot of room. I'm kind of hoping maybe Arcade 1-Up or maybe Replicade, hint, hint, Replicade, hint, hint, makes a little quarter-scale Tetris machine. That'd be cool. That's Numbskull makes a quarter-scale ones. Numbskull, hint, hint, Tetris, Tetris, hint, hint. Anyway, now let's hear from Brian's Man Cave. Brian does a YouTube show where he does a lot of gameplay videos, a lot of times for the first time experiencing some of these older games. He's a lot of fun to watch as well, so let's see what Brian has to say about Tetris.
Hey guys, it's Brian from Brian's Man Cave. So when Willie asked me if I wanted to be a part of this video, I said hell yeah. And that's because I have a long history of loving Tetris. In fact, it was one of the reasons why really I wanted a Nintendo was to be able to play Tetris on the Nintendo. But of course, we also had the Game Boy, which was no surprise. I mean, it came with Tetris. Probably one of the best decisions ever made by Nintendo to put Tetris with the Game Boy. Because a lot of people probably bought a Game Boy just so they could play Tetris. I bet you a lot of people only bought the Game Boy just for Tetris. But my memory of Tetris, it even goes beyond those things in that I remember wanting to play the game before I had any way of playing it. I didn't have a Nintendo at the time. I didn't have a Game Boy at the time. I had an Atari, I think I had my Atari 2600 Junior, and I had a Commodore 64. And I did not have the actual Tetris game on the Commodore 64. I'm not even sure if one was around at that point. But what I did have was a subscription to Commodore 64 Compute's Gazette magazine. This actually still has my old address on there and everything. And inside, I got this every month, and I opened it up, and I saw this game called, well, I don't know how to pronounce that. I always call it Queb. Q-E-W-B. Queb. As you can see, it looks like a Tetris game. So immediately I was excited, and I started reading it. I'm like, wow, this is like a Tetris game. Only difference is it goes sideways instead of down. I'm like, I'm okay with that. It's still Tetris. Now, the other downside is to play this game, you have to type in all this code. Machine code, actually. It's not even like legible code. It's machine code. And you have to type it in, and it goes all the way, all that stuff there, all that there. I mean, that's really tiny font. So there's a lot there to type in. The good thing is they give you like a program you could use to actually type this stuff in easily and make sure you don't make any mistakes. And when I got that typed out and, I was able to play this, I remember taking it to school, and I had people playing it on the Commodore 64 at school. I had a blast playing that game. But obviously, once I got my Nintendo, this was the game that I had to buy, and I ran out and bought it right away. So yeah, that's my little memory of Tetris, even though it wasn't an official Tetris title, and it was played on the Commodore 64. That was my little memory of playing Tetris.
Oh, that's awesome, Brian. Yeah, Cube on the Commodore 64. I don't think I've ever played that game. I have to give it a try on my emulator. But I remember having to type in lines and lines of code for magazines. I had a subscription to Antic magazine for my Atari 800. And every issue, they would have game programs in there, and I would type them in. Luckily, we had ways of saving it. We had a little floppy drive. I do remember when I had my original Bally Astrocade, I used to type in programs on that, which was done on a little keypad, which is even more difficult. And I had no way of saving them at the time because I used a tape drive. I didn't have a tape drive. So it was like a one shot. Leave it on so you can play the game. Anyway, last but not least, let's see what Phil, the No Swear Gamer, has to say about Tetris.
You know, I have quite a few Tetris memories. I remember there was this mom and pop video store that had a NES Tengen version of Tetris to rent, which was very hard to find. And if my memory serves me correctly, you actually had to put down a deposit if you wanted to rent that version of Tetris. I guess it was highly sought after, and the mom and pop owners didn't want anyone stealing it. I also remember when they came out with Tetris Plus on the PlayStation and the Sega Saturn, one of my favorite versions of Tetris. But most of my memories, of course, revolve around this, the Game Boy version of Tetris. You see, when I was younger, my mom would often go to Target to shop, and those trips seemed to take quite a long time. And usually there wasn't a lot to do to pass the time, so I'd go to the electronics section, look at the games in the case, maybe go buy toys. But then one day after the Game Boy was released, they had a kiosk with an original Game Boy hooked to it. And I think there was even a TV monitor above it. It was hardwired. The Game Boy was hardwired into it. And they had a game you could play without any time limit. Usually it was Tetris. I think once in a while they had like Super Mario Land or something like that. So I would go down to the electronic department and I would just park myself right at the kiosk and I would play this. I would play the Game Boy version of Tetris until I was bored, which was, that took quite a while. So it's amazing as a kid how having something to play while you're in the store, especially back then when people didn't have smartphones and a lot of portable, game devices. It was amazing as a kid just to have something to do while your mom shopped. I was never big into shopping and I usually dreaded Mom going shopping and saying, okay, it's time to get in the car. But when Tetris came to my local Target, it turned something tedious more into a joy, and I will forever be thankful for that. So happy birthday, Tetris. I hope you have a good one, and thanks for all the years of fun.
Well, thanks for that submission, Phil. Yes, it's official. The Game Boy version of Tetris has won the video. It shows how iconic this game was on this system and how smart Nintendo was for putting this game on this system. Phenomenal. If you never played the Game Boy version of Tetris, you really need to give it a try. You can find Game Boys out there fairly cheap. They're all over the place. This game works all on the SPs, the newer Game Boy, stuff like that. It's actually a really good game to get a hold of. So that was Tetris Memories. Do you have any favorite Tetris memories that you'd like to share? Comment down below. If you have a YouTube channel, make a Tetris memory video and I'll share it on Arcade USA and post a link down below in this video as well. Anyway, as always everyone, thanks for watching and happy birthday Tetris. We all love you.